morning and welcome to Creative Mornings Winnipeg, our first event for 2023. On behalf of our Creative Mornings team, we're so excited to kick off the new year with you all today. We've strived to highlight enticing and inspirational themes over the last couple of years, and we're really looking forward to continuing the fun with you all. If we haven't had the chance to meet previously, my name is Lindsay Lambert, and I am one of the Creative Mornings Winnipeg Steering Committee members, and I'm also the MC and script writer. I've been involved with Creative Mornings since May of last year, and it's definitely safe to say that it's one of my favorite areas to volunteer within, and it certainly is always just a great opportunity to connect with new members from the community, and it's nice to see a lot of new faces today, so it's nice to meet you all.
You say that you're fine, do you believe it? Follow the call. Hey, follow the call. If you want it and you gotta give it all. Follow the call. If you want it and you got to.
Our Sheffield chapter chose this month, and Lisa Malby brought the theme of sanctuary to life in their illustration. Here's how our Creative Mornings headquarters welcomes a theme of sanctuary. Now, I was actually going to ask everyone to close their eyes during this. You can if you'd like, because I thought their theme and their intro was quite powerful. But this is how they introduced it. You can stop running now. You are safe here. A sanctuary provides protection to those who are vulnerable, those who are fleeing violence, those who have been cast off and told there is no place for them there, even animals whose habitats have disappeared. Here is a place where you can finally lay your head down and rest. The original meaning of sanctuary was a sacred place containing a holy relic or person. A sanctuary recognizes that each of us, no matter where we come from or what we've been through, or even our needs, whether that be a full belly, for a roof, for safety, to be free from worries, are inviolable and whole. Where do you find refuge? What happens to your body when you cross its threshold? And most importantly, how can you hold the door open for others? Reading this introduction for myself rings like a warm cup of coffee, honestly. Or maybe the feeling of walking on a winter walk somewhere and maybe a glimpse of sunshine that peeks through the trees and that just hits your face so softly. When I first reviewed the theme, I simply took in a deep breath and instantly felt safe. And it's with that where I personally find my sanctuary. To be able to recognize what spaces for you feels like home or like a sanctuary is such an incredible experience. And I want to challenge all of you to consider these feelings and views that we shape around these safe spaces and ask yourself, what would happen if we could fill them within ourselves? Could you imagine how these spaces would feel even more light if we entered them knowing that we already felt comfortable, confident, and simply content within ourselves? Our bodies, of course, are incredible on their own, but consider how you can find a way to ensure you feel safe in your own body, and I bet you'd find that you'd have the joy of traveling within a sanctuary every day.
And here's that manifesto. Everyone is creative. A creative life requires bravery, action, honesty, and hard work. We are here to support you, to celebrate with you, and encourage you to make the things you love. We believe in the power of community. We believe in giving a damn. We believe in face-to-face connections, in learning from others, in jazz hands and high fives. We bring together people who are driven by passion and purpose, confident that they will inspire one another, and inspire change in neighborhoods, cities, and all over the world. Everyone is welcome. The Winnipeg chapter has also made a commitment to reflecting diversity and ensuring inclusion for our events. We've seen some of that today. Located in one of the most diverse communities in North America, we are inclusive as we are creative, and we will be creative in order to achieve inclusion. We believe in the value of diversity of perspectives, audiences, and industries as we create safe events to debate and discuss what it means to be creative. We will celebrate multiple approaches and points of view, and we will be mindful and purposeful in building a culture where these differences are not only valued, but are celebrated. And now it is my privilege to introduce our speaker and a good friend and colleague of mine, Kirsten Wurmann. Kirsten is a librarian an art lover, a walker, and a former hostel owner. She is passionate about social justice and creating access to information for all. To that end, she has volunteered inside carceral institutions for 15 years in both Alberta and Manitoba. Kirsten is the founder and the chair of the Manitoba Library Association's Prison Libraries Committee, which we often refer to as PLC. Formed in 2012, the Prison Libraries Committee brings books and library services and programming to 6 provincial carceral institutions in Manitoba, where there previously were no libraries. The PLC believes that access to books, to literacy, and the information is a right for all. And while that is their goal, they have come to realize that one of the most important things that we can do is to create a moment to facilitate a space where humanity and perhaps even hope can exist. The Kirsten that I know is generous. She has an amazing amount of integrity. She is a true leader in our community. I think I would say a quiet leader because she's also incredibly humble. So she would tell you that the PLC is not her. It is a team, it's a community of people. But I'm always saying to her, yes, that's true. However, without a strong leader, without someone who has the ability to create an idea, to stand behind it for many, many years and to push it forward, we wouldn't have PLC. And all of that great team wouldn't be able to be coached, to be propelled forward without such a strong leader. So thank you, Kirsten, for all that you do in our community, and please come on up.
Thanks so much for inviting me. Thank you so much for coming out. I had a really great walk here this morning, about 40 minutes in the nice cold, and for part of that time I was following this guy who was walking like this the whole time, and I was like, oh my gosh, he just looks like he's so happy on this Friday morning. So, you know, I just started walking like that too, so feeling good. I mean, so now we delve into this topic. It's not the most gleeful, joyful topic, but I hope that you will get something out of it that maybe kind of can expand your ideas of maybe what you have around corrections, around these carceral institutions, and around the folks, our community members, who are inside those spaces right now. So I do want to say that the work that we do with the PLC, and we've got a couple volunteers here, peeps, those carceral institutions are on Treaty 1 and Treaty 5 territories. We know that so many of our community members who are inside these prisons have been impacted by these treaties, and that many of the promises made in those treaties have remained unfulfilled. And yes, I do always acknowledge that I'm just one of a team of volunteers, and it is that team, those volunteers, and the community members inside that help guide the work that we do, including, this is the logo for our committee, and it was created by a woman inside the Women's Correctional Center. Should I just like,
Yeah,
point
for
it?
sure.
Okay. So yes, we were founded in 2012. We are all volunteers, every single one of us volunteers. We have little to no funding, aside from the $500 a year that we get from the Manitoba Library Association. Thank you so much. And we serve really only provincial institutions. And this is because we found that that is where there was the largest need, i.e. there were no library spaces or materials. And I think that might bust some of your preconceived notions. This is not Orange is the New Black. This is not Shawshank Redemption. And there are no libraries. So we first went into the remand, which is actually pictured here. This is a graphic that one of our volunteers created. Right downtown Winnipeg on Kennedy, you might have walked past it, doesn't look like a prison, looks like an office tower. So we went into the remand and started doing programming in there once a week. Then the Women's Correctional Center heard about us. They contacted us and asked us to come into their new facility and do some library programming and bring books in, create a library. Then Headingley Correctional Center contacted us, the same thing. They said, we've heard what you're doing at WCC, and they wanted us to come in. We now are just in the midst of creating a library at Milner Ridge. We have a volunteer who works up at the PAW with the regional system up there and has been going into the PAW Correctional Center for the past 5 years, I believe. And we have also supported the Manitoba Youth Center and Agassiz Youth Center. Okay, some stats, keeping it real. So these are from the Correctional Statistics Dashboard. And you can look up any sort of statistic nationally, and then it's broken down into the provinces as well. So incarceration rate per 100,000 nationally, it is 41. In Manitoba, it is 158. 70% of folks who are serving time inside correctional institutions are in remand. That's actually not that unique to Manitoba. I think the national rate is 65%. So remand means you haven't actually been sentenced yet. So these are folks awaiting trial or awaiting their sentences, 70%. Wow. In terms of incarcerated adults, 31% nationally are Indigenous. In Manitoba, it's much, much higher, 77%. And in some of the institutions, it's as high as 85, 90%. So I think we all know, the research is clear, reporting has been very, very clear, that this huge overrepresentation of Indigenous and people of color is the direct result of the damages and intergenerational trauma of colonization and systemic racism. Access to information is a human right. Just because you're incarcerated doesn't mean that you've given up that right. Doesn't mean that you've given up the right to learn and to access information. And in fact, I would say that that becomes even more important when you're inside a carceral institution. And it turns out that folks inside prisons have the same types of information needs as us. Surprise, surprise. So during the pandemic, we started an email reference service. So because we couldn't actually go into the institutions. So this is a service where folks will fill out a form, write down their research question or just whatever information that they want. They'll give it to the teacher, and then the teacher emails our team, and then we send them back some information that the teacher can then print out and hand over to whichever person asks for the information. So it runs a broad gamut from language learning, so many questions about language learning. So many folks want to learn their Indigenous language. So many folks want to learn ASL. We get that request all the time. But they also want to learn Punjabi or Spanish. So that's a really, really big, big request. Indigenous cooking, entrepreneurship, mental health, and legal resources, of course. And not to mention all the book requests. And the constant requests for James Patterson. We cannot keep up with the James Patterson requests. Holy moly. I mean, I guess it's a good thing that he keeps churning them out every week. But also lots of requests for Game of Thrones, true crime for sure, Twilight, the Twilight series. We just had to find a bunch of soft cover for the Twilight series for the men's prison. People really become readers in prison. Fiction can help build empathy and help the reader experience another person's point of view. even the bad characters, like you said. It's really important. And folks inside, they really want to hear the stories of hardship, but how someone has overcome that hardship. So what's been interesting is we've really found out that within the units, there are a few people who have sort of become self-proclaimed librarians. So I'll get these requests, and it'll be from the name librarian for Unit 2. And then he'll give all of the requests from the guys on his unit. Or one guy told me, okay, I started a book club. We're reading The Taking by Dean Koontz, and then I'm going to have everybody write a summary and share it. I was like, what? That's amazing, like blew my mind. So these things are happening just in the grassroots, unit level. But books like Gabor Mate, huge requests for Gabor Mate and any sort of addiction, self-help. Beading and art books. We had an older woman who would come in and she would just be looking for anything to inspire her because she was teaching all the younger women beading techniques. The best though is when the folks can come into the space that we've created themselves and then choose their own book or say, oh, I love this book, you should read it, and then we can talk about it afterwards. Or we had a book, just one book of how to use your body as a gym, so for strength training. And so one guy had it, and then there were all these other guys around looking and almost like committing the pictures to memory, because then they'd go back to their cell and work out. So it's a joy to work with these folks and to interact with them and find out what their needs are, what they're interested in, and it's just an escape for us all, really. My big memory I have too is one guy, he left the space and he was like, Dostoevsky, yeah! Okay, so, but despite this need, prison libraries are very much overlooked in Manitoba prisons. There's no funding, there are no libraries, there's no internet. The teachers, some of the staff have access to internet, but the folks inside, our community members, do not have access to internet. In Manitoba, we have no provincial legislation to mandate that there should be libraries in prison, like there are for federal institutions, where there are some commissioner directives that say every library, federal library needs to have a library, federal prison needs to have a library, they need to have a library staff person, and here are the books that they have to have, which includes a bunch of legal resources. We need to have that provincially. Information poverty and barriers to information access, along with low levels of literacy, do nothing to help incarcerated individuals deal with the complexities of an information-driven and information-rich society. So the reality is when we do this work, despite all of this, we are trying to build relationships. We are trying to work with community, create community, not to mention work within the carceral bureaucracy, but it all takes time. It takes so much time. So we take our time, we persevere, and the folks that we work with, whether it's the incarcerated folks, whether it's the teachers, the guards, the counselors, they know that we are in it for the long haul. They can count on us. We work with a community development model where we go in and we're not going in there as the experts, that we know everything. We're very much, we're learners in an unfamiliar space. So we really approach the work as, we're co-learners. We're learning alongside you. We try to meet our incarcerated community members where they're at. We're not non-judgmental as much as we can be. We're information-based. We try to be inmate-led. So we talk to these folks. We try and find out what is it that you want. We have surveys. I just got a bunch of surveys from some of the guys at Milner Ridge. We do focus groups. We value their own lived experiences. We value their lived knowledge. We have so much to learn. And we let them know that we care by showing up and by not wearing a uniform, frankly. It's very difficult to do library work within a prison. It's not really set up. Libraries, we value information access for all, equal access for all, and that's not really how a prison is set up. They have some pretty strict, rigid rules, of course, and so we don't always fit in. So we have to be really creative to do the work that we do. For instance, during the pandemic, we created, like I was saying, the email reference service. And that really was able to happen because of all the relationship building that we did with the teachers. During the pandemic as well, we created community care packages that we delivered to families of incarcerated folks and also to halfway houses. So we all know that there are some really huge systemic changes that are desperately needed to address the institutional racism and colonial trauma and hurt that exists within and for so many of our community members. And we see that out in our community right now. It's not just in the carceral institutions. But that big systemic change that can seem pretty overwhelming to a group of volunteers. So what we've come to realize and to understand with our work is that sometimes we have to focus a little smaller to, I guess, go a bit simpler. So we often look at and work towards creating that humanizing moment as sanctuary, creating a sense of community as sanctuary, creating connections to themselves, to each other, to the books as sanctuary, and offering care for each other, for themselves, for ourselves, also as sanctuary. Just before the pandemic, we offered some writing circles, and we created we published a chapbook of writings and poems from women, by women at the Women's Correctional Center. I've got a few copies of it up here that you can take a look at. So those types of, and we're hoping to do a volume 2. We have, I think, the former writer in residence from WPL on board to do some writing circles with us and with the women, so that'll be exciting. We had a public launch. We sent books, copies of the books to the families. You can actually find this book in the collection of Winnipeg Public Library as well. So we're excited about volume 2. So really, alongside the books that we have and we provide, any of that accompanying library programming and workshops can also be a place to help facilitate that moment of connection and humanity, as well as a space to share that important lived knowledge and experience. Okay, so here are some final thoughts. How do we move forward? By showing up, by doing the work, by being engaged, by sharing and telling stories. And perhaps in the words of Daniel Heath Justice, who is a Indigenous professor at UBC and a member of the Cherokee Nation, we imagine otherwise. I think we have to start imagining otherwise. I think we look at it in our community right now, Millennium and the security measures, the transit buses and the need for security on buses. Let's try to imagine otherwise and not go this route of security for our safety. Imagining otherwise, says Daniel Heath Justice, is rooted in telling stories. And for those people who have seen me speak before, I often tell this story, but I have to again, about when Nigan Sinclair, we brought him in to the remand. When we first started our work, Nigan Sinclair, of course, Indigenous academic, writer, columnist, and he came in, he had just finished collecting for the anthology Manitowapo, which had a bunch of stories and history over the last 100 years of Indigenous writings. He shared with us afterwards that many of the inmates who came to his talk, they knew the stories. Many of them knew the writers. Many of them were actually even related to them. And this is what he told them. He said, "These are your stories. People want to hear your stories. Never let anyone tell you that your stories are not important." Powerful message, powerful moment, and I think probably a really powerful moment of sanctuary for so many of those folks. We will move forward by remaining committed to the work by focusing on community, connection, and care, and by recognizing people's full humanity, their individuality, their lived knowledge, and their potential. Thank you.